December 16th, 2024, Maryland. Above the tree line, someone filmed a cluster of blue lights holding position, symmetrical, evenly spaced, not blinking in any FAA-registered pattern. A second cluster below it, a third below that. Multiple formations, perfectly still above the same patch of sky. The footage went viral in hours. Officials said drones. The witnesses said that they'd never seen drones hold formation like that. Nobody could point to a flight plan, an operator, or an FAA authorization for what was in that sky. Maryland was not the beginning of this story.
He too saw lights in the sky last night, and that one of those lights had crashed into the waters of Shag Harbor.
October 4th, 1967. Residents of Shag Harbor, a small fishing village on the coast of Nova Scotia, Canada, watched something tilt out of the sky and crash into the ocean. Now, it was not a plane. No aircraft were reported missing. No debris was recovered. No bodies. No wreckage of any kind. They called the police. Constable Ron Pound arrived and saw it himself, a glowing object on the surface of the water about half a mile offshore, before it slowly sank from view. He filed a report. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police filed a report. The Canadian Coast Guard launched boats. The Department of National Defense sent divers to search the sea floor. They found nothing. What makes Shag Harbor unique in the entire history of UFO cases is what happened next. The Canadian government, after completing its investigation, officially recorded the incident in its files as an unidentified flying object, not a probable aircraft, not a possible meteor. The word they used was unidentified. No other government in North American history has officially logged a UAP encounter with that specific designation. The file sits in the Canadian National Archives. It has never been reclassified. Skeptics suggested that the object may have been a Soviet spy satellite re-entering the atmosphere, which could produce exactly the kind of light and surface disturbance witnesses described. The Canadian Department of National Defense reviewed that possibility and rejected it. No Soviet satellite re-entry was tracked over Nova Scotia on that date. The witnesses stuck to their accounts for the rest of their lives. The water gave up nothing. The file remains open. Canada logged it and moved on. In New Mexico, 20 years earlier, the U.S. military went in a different direction. They announced what they found, then changed the story entirely. On July 8, 1947, the public affairs officer of Roswell Army Airfield in New Mexico, Lieutenant Walter Haut, issued a press release that ran in newspapers around the world. The 509th Bomb Group had recovered a flying disc. Those were the words, not an aircraft, not a weather instrument, a flying disc, in the custody of the United States Army. By the following day, the Army had revised its statement. It was a weather balloon, specifically the wreckage from Project Mogul, a classified program using high-altitude balloons to monitor Soviet nuclear activity. The rancher, Mac Brazel, who had found the debris on his property outside of Corona, was escorted to the local newspaper to confirm the revised version. Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who had collected the debris from Brazel's ranch and told his family it was unlike anything he had ever seen in his military career, was photographed beside the weather balloon material. He later said in interviews that what was photographed was not what he had collected from the field. Skeptic and historian Robert Todd spent decades arguing that Project Mogul fully explained everything found at Roswell. That the debris was consistent with balloon material, foil reflectors, and balsa wood. That the witnesses who described exotic materials were either misremembering or embellishing. His research remains the most detailed conventional explanation available. What no conventional explanation has addressed, though, is why the Army issued a press release announcing a flying disc in the first place. Weather balloons had been recovered before. None of them had generated a military press release calling them flying discs. Walter Haut, the officer who wrote the original press release, gave a sealed affidavit before his death in 2005, stating that he had seen both the craft and the bodies recovered at Roswell, and that the weather balloon explanation was just a cover story he had been ordered to support. The affidavit was opened after his death, and the Army has not responded to it. Roswell's significance is not the alien bodies or Hangar 18. It's the press release. An official military press release announced a flying disc recovery. Press releases at active military installations during that period did not happen by accident. The story was changed the next day. Nobody has answered who approved the first one. Roswell changed the story once. The satellite that detected something over the South Atlantic in 1979 produced a story the U.S. government has never been able to change at all. On September 22, 1979, the U.S. spy satellite Vela 6911 detected a double flash of light over the ocean near the South Atlantic and Indian Ocean boundary, in the region between South Africa and Antarctica. The double flash pattern was a specific signature that the Vela satellite network was designed to detect. It was the optical signature of a nuclear detonation in the atmosphere. The Vela system had successfully identified every nuclear test conducted by every nation since it was deployed. It did not produce false positives. No nation claimed responsibility for a nuclear test that day. President Carter ordered an investigation. The ad hoc panel, chaired by MIT physicist Jack Ruina, reviewed all available data and concluded in 1980 that the signal was probably not a nuclear explosion, attributing it to a possible sensor malfunction caused by a micrometeorite strike on the satellite. But not all scientists agreed. Naval Research Laboratory analyst Lynn Sykes and other independent researchers concluded the signature was fully consistent with a low-yield nuclear test. Declassified intelligence files obtained years later indicated that CIA analysts believed the event was a joint Israeli-South African nuclear test conducted in secret, consistent with the geographic location and the political arrangements of the period. Neither Israel nor South Africa has ever confirmed or denied a nuclear test on that date. The Rowena panel conclusion, probable sensor malfunction, has never been accepted as definitive by the full scientific community. The Vela incident remains the only case in which a system built specifically to detect nuclear events detected one that no nation would account for. Official data, official equipment. An official result no nation would own. In Maryland in 2024, the footage was civilian. The formations were visible to anyone who looked up. Officials still had no answer that matched what the cameras showed. The footage began circulating on the night of December 16, 2024. It was shot in Maryland, above a dark tree line against an early evening sky. What the cameras captured was a cluster of blue lights arranged in a symmetrical formation, hovering at low altitude, evenly spaced, holding position. Below it, a second smaller cluster. Below that, a third. One large formation leading two smaller ones in a vertical stack, all of them perfectly still above the same stretch of suburban sky. The footage was not taken by one person. Multiple residents filmed the same formations from different locations. The object appeared, based on the footage, to be structured rather than a loose grouping. The lights did not wobble or drift the way consumer drones drift when they hold position. They were locked in place. 2 days earlier, on December 14th, a Life Flight medical pilot operating in southern Maryland encountered fast-moving orbs over Calvert County. The pilot filed a report. Air traffic controllers confirmed there were no radar returns for the objects the pilot described. A trained aviation professional flying a medical aircraft at operational altitude, reporting objects moving in ways inconsistent with any registered traffic, with air traffic control unable to find them on radar. Now, that detail did not make national news. Officials responded with a standard explanation: drones. Possibly an FAA-authorized drone light show, or a commercial formation flight. Now, some analysts suggested the footage may have been digitally created using AI video tools. The drone explanation didn't address the absence of any registered flight plan in that airspace for that evening. Commercial drone formation flights require FAA authorization that creates a public record. No such record was located for December 16, 2024, in the areas of Maryland where the footage was shot. The text overlay on the original footage read, "Now they're over Maryland." The implication was that similar formations had appeared elsewhere in recent weeks. The December 2024 window had produced a surge of similar sighting reports across the Northeast, none of which received an official explanation that fully matched the footage. The Maryland footage was circulated because of its clarity. Unlike most UFO footage, it was shot in multiple versions from multiple angles, in sufficient light to show structure rather than just points of light. The formations in the footage were the clearest aerial anomaly documented in the region in years. Authorities continue to encourage the public to report sightings through official channels. The Maryland formations, as of the time this video was produced, have not been officially identified. Formations visible to dozens of civilians above residential tree lines in broad evening conditions. The Phoenix Lights, 27 years earlier, had been seen by thousands, and the government's explanation for those took a decade to fall apart. On the night of March 13, 1997, thousands of people across a corridor stretching from Nevada through Phoenix and south toward Tucson, Arizona, watched something cross the sky that did not behave like any known aircraft. Two separate events were recorded that night. First, a massive V-shaped or arrowhead formation of lights crossed the sky from north to south in near total silence. Witnesses described it moving slowly and steadily, covering a distance from Henderson, Nevada to the Tucson Basin over several hours. Second, a grouping of orbs appeared over Phoenix and hovered in place for an extended period before disappearing one by one. Governor Fife Symington of Arizona held a press conference in the days following the incident and brought out an aide dressed in an alien costume. The crowd laughed. Symington laughed. Well, 10 years later, he gave a different statement. He said he had personally witnessed the craft on the night of March 13th, that it was enormous, that it moved silently over the Valley of the Sun, and that he knew immediately it was not anything made by human hands. He said he had staged the press conference to calm public anxiety, but had never believed his own joke. The official explanation from Luke Air Force Base attributed the second event, the orbs, to flares dropped during a training exercise by A-10 aircraft. The explanation was developed and issued by Colonel F.F. Goldsworthy. Flares on parachutes, he said, could produce exactly the slow fade effect witnesses described. The first event, the massive V-shaped object seen for hours across 3 states, was never officially explained. No military exercise has been attributed to it. No flight plan was filed for an aircraft capable of moving that slowly, that silently, across that geography. Governor Symington's retraction was public, specific, and sworn. The flare explanation covered one of the 2 events. The other has no official account. The V-formation witnesses spanned more than 300 miles of geography. Truck drivers, off-duty police, airplane pilots, different locations, same description, same direction, same silence. The official position is still that nothing was confirmed. Arizona had its civilian witnesses in the thousands. Rendlesham Forest had military witnesses with recording equipment. What they documented was harder to dismiss than any press conference. Between December 26th and 28th, 1980, personnel from the U.S. Air Force stationed at RAF Woodbridge in Suffolk, England, encountered something in the forest adjacent to the base on 3 consecutive nights. On the first night, Sergeant Jim Peniston and Airman John Burroughs approached a craft resting in a clearing. Now, Peniston described it as triangular, roughly 9 feet long, hovering silently above the ground. The surface, he said, was smooth and black like glass. He touched it. He later reported feeling symbols under his fingertips and sketched them in his notebook immediately afterward. His notebook was preserved. On the third night, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt led a team into the forest and brought a handheld audio recorder. He narrated what he was seeing in real time. The recording captures Holt describing lights moving between the trees, a beam of light descending from a hovering object onto the base, and objects moving at extreme speed across the sky. Holt later signed an affidavit stating that what he witnessed was definitely not of any earthly craft, and that the United States and British governments were aware of the incidents and had chosen to suppress information about them. The British Ministry of Defence's official explanation was that the lights were from the Orford Ness Lighthouse, visible through the trees. Colonel Ted Conrad, Holt's superior officer, maintained the explanation was entirely mundane and suggested Holt had been confused by the lighthouse and a bright meteor. Peniston and Burroughs filed FOIA requests for their own medical records after both developed radiation-related health problems in subsequent years. The British government withheld some of their records under national security exemptions. Medical records from an encounter with a lighthouse do not typically require national security exemptions. The audio recording of Lieutenant Colonel Holt describing, in real time, objects behaving in ways no known aircraft could replicate remains the most credible first-person documentation of a UAP encounter ever produced by a senior military officer. A forest in England had a senior officer with a recorder. Antarctica, decades earlier, had a fleet the size of a small war. In August 1946, the United States Navy assembled 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and 4,700 personnel for a peacetime mission to Antarctica. The operation was led by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the most celebrated polar explorer in American history. It was officially designated a training exercise for cold-weather military operations. No war was being fought. No adversary held territory in Antarctica. The official rationale for a full naval task force to the most remote continent on Earth has never fully accounted for the scale of what was deployed. Historian Dean Olson Bellinger, consulted by Smithsonian Magazine in 2007, maintains the mission was exactly what it claimed to be. The Navy had classified orders to establish territorial claims in Antarctica, needed to prove its capabilities to President Truman ahead of post-war budget cuts, and had genuine cold-weather logistics problems to solve. The scale made sense, she argued, when all three objectives were combined. Admiral Byrd's reported diary entry, widely circulated in UFO communities, describes an encounter with craft of unknown origin that flew over the fleet. The authenticity of that diary entry has never been verified, and most researchers consider it fabricated. What is documented? The operation was cut short. Byrd returned from Antarctica several weeks ahead of schedule. The official reason given was weather. No detailed account of what ended the mission early was ever made public. The expedition produced extensive aerial photography of Antarctic territory and established the framework for all subsequent U.S. polar operations. It also produced a mystery that 60 years of official silence has done nothing to resolve. Why deploy 4,700 people to a continent with no strategic value, then leave early and say nothing specific about why? In a press interview after the mission, Byrd described the need to prepare for attack from aircraft capable of flying from pole to pole at incredible speeds. He said this in 1947. No country had aircraft capable of that in 1947. The Navy never addressed the statement. It was quietly set aside. Between November 1989 and April 1990, Belgium experienced the most thoroughly documented series of UFO sightings in European history. 13,500 people reported unusual objects in the sky. The objects were described consistently: large, triangular, with lights at each corner and a central light underneath. Silent or nearly so, moving slowly at low altitude, and capable of instantaneous acceleration that no known aircraft could possibly replicate. Now, what separated the Belgian wave from every other case in this script was what the government did next. The Belgian Air Force did not issue a weather balloon statement. They didn't classify the evidence. They scrambled 2 F-16 fighter jets on the night of March 30th, 1990, with orders to intercept and identify the object being tracked on both ground radar and the jet's own onboard systems. The F-16s achieved radar lock 3 times. Each time, within seconds, the object accelerated from 280 km per hour to over 1,800 km per hour and dropped from 3,000 meters to 1,700 meters in under 2 seconds. No aircraft in any nation's inventory in 1990 could execute that maneuver. The G-forces required to do it would have killed a human pilot. Major General Wilfried de Brouwer, head of the Belgian Air Force Operations Division, held a press conference. He displayed the radar tapes. He invited journalists to review them. He stated publicly that the Belgian Air Force had been unable to identify the object and that the radar data was genuine. Skeptic Auguste Miezen, a physicist at the Catholic University of Leuven, who had been commissioned by the Belgian UFO research group, SOBEPS, to analyze the radar data, argued that the extreme speed changes on the radar printout were caused by false target returns, a known radar artifact where the system locks onto its own ground returns rather than a real object at altitude. He said the F-16s had been chasing phantom signals. But de Brouwer did not retract. The radar returns were consistent across 2 aircraft and ground systems simultaneously. The Belgian government published a 500-page report with all data included. The most transparent official UAP investigation any government has ever produced. Its conclusion? Unknown. Every case in this script ends the same way. Not with an answer, with a government that ran out of explanations and either changed the subject, or in Belgium's case, simply said so. From a fishing village in Nova Scotia to a suburban tree line in Maryland, from a Belgian Air Force press conference to a U.S. Army press release that disappeared overnight, every case left a record. Not one left an answer. Which of these 8 do you think is the hardest to explain? And if Belgium could be transparent about what their Air Force found, why do you think nobody else has been? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.